Welcome, I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching Gulf Today on News X World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. French President Emmanuel Macron and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas announced a joint committee to draft a new Palestinian constitution. They say reforms are crucial for a democratic sovereign state and stress peaceful coexistence alongside Israel. Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, has met with Pinarayi Vijayan, the Chief Minister of Kerala, India, to discuss strengthening bilateral cooperation in key economic and development sectors. The meeting, attended by UAE's top officials, aimed to advance strategic partnerships aligned with both nations' visions. The UAE has announced $46 billion in national infrastructure projects by 2030 to ease traffic congestion, expand highways, and develop a smart, sustainable transport system linking all Emirates, boosting road capacity by up to 65% to decrease congestion. 6 ancient statues were stolen from the National Museum of Damascus in Syria, one of the Middle East's oldest cultural institutions. Damascus Security Chief Osama Mohammed Khair Atke announced an investigation and search operations to recover the artifacts, as authorities question guards. Turkey's defense ministry has confirmed that 20 soldiers were killed when a C-130 military cargo plane crashed in Georgia Kakheti district after departing from Azerbaijan. Authorities from Turkey and Georgia have launched a joint investigation into this recent military incident. Despite last month's Israel-Hamas ceasefire, families in Gaza remain without electricity. The Strip, which needed 600 megawatts of power before the war, now receives none, leaving residents reliant on flashlights and solar charging points to survive, which they struggle to recharge. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand meets with counterparts from India, France, and Mexico as G7 foreign ministers gather. Talks focus on Ukraine as the group of industrialized democracies seek a path to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Australia and Indonesia signed a new security treaty committing to consult each other if either nation faces threats. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto emphasized joint action, close defense cooperation, and regular dialogue. Now we start with Middle East. French President Emmanuel Macron has stated that France will help the Palestinian Authority to draft a constitution for a future Palestinian state. Macron has added that France will contribute 100 million euros in humanitarian aid to Gaza for 2025. A number of major Western nations, including France, have formally recognized the Palestinian state in September, a move driven by frustration with Israel over its devastating war in Gaza and to promote a two-state solution to the conflict. Let's listen into what the French president has said.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, comptez sur la France pour continuer d'avancer dans la voie tracée ensemble, pour continuer d'avancer sur la base des 20 points proposés par les États-Unis d'Amérique et ouvrant la porte à la paix et la constitution d'un État palestinien. C'est à cette fin que nous avons pris aujourd'hui ensemble la décision de mettre en place un comité conjoint pour la consolidation de l'État de Palestine. Ce comité sera chargé de travailler sur tous les aspects juridiques, constitutionnels, institutionnels et organisationnels. Il contribuera au travail d'élaboration d'une nouvelle constitution dont le président Abbas m'a présenté un projet et visera à parachever l'ensemble des conditions d'un tel état de...
Meanwhile, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has reaffirmed his condemnation of the killing and kidnappings of civilians on both sides. Abbas has also reaffirmed his commitment to carrying out reforms within the Palestinian Authority, including holding elections. Let's listen in.
نجدد التأكيد على رفضنا وإدانتنا لقتل وخطف المدنيين بما في ذلك ما قامت به حماس في 7 أكتوبر. ومن ناحية أخرى نرفض معاداة السامية لأنها ضد سياستنا وقيمنا، ونتمسك بثقافة الحوار والسلام، وإننا نريد دولة ديمقراطية غير مسلحة ملتزمة بسيادة القانون والشفافية والعدالة والتعددية وتداول السلطة.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Sasha Machta. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sasha, now, what is your analysis? Is two-state solution realistic solution to what we see Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Macron pushing? Do you think this is feasible in near future?
So in the near future, I don't see this possibility as realistic. It's pretty much Israeli consensus that a two-state solution would be an existential threat at the moment for Israel. We have to remind the audience that the Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, most of the territory are the hilltops overlooking the Israeli center, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and the airport. So to allow for a Palestinian state to be created at this point without undergoing a severe de-radicalization and drastic reforms is just going to be used as a launchpad for further attacks on Israel. And that's pretty much the general consensus that Israelis feel. We saw in the past year in the Knesset there was a vote that was passed, and almost 80 out of 120 members of Knesset from all sides, left and right, agreed that at the moment two states is unfeasible. The only question is, what do we do going forward? Some on the left advocate for slow reforms to separate from the Palestinians and eventually lead to the Palestinian state, and those on the right are trying to look for other solutions. But the consensus is that a two-state at the moment is impossible, especially after the horrific October 7th massacre.
And so why do you think these two leaders met and are already talking about, two-state solution, and even Macron has promised funds for this, and funds for not this, but aiding Palestine or Gaza?
Yeah, so when we look at Macron's actions in the Middle East, we have to take it into context. We have to understand that Macron is dealing with a very, very weak domestic politics. He's had 5 prime ministers in the past 2 years. He's very unstable. He has a severe problem with radical Islam. There are neighborhoods that his police cannot enter. Jews in France are afraid to show they're Jewish. Jews in France are attacked in the streets, and Macron has his own problems in France. But I believe that Macron is under the impression that if he were to appease to the radical Islam in Israel and Palestine, it would make the streets of Paris safer. So I think that all of his actions have been severely irresponsible, especially when he declared a Palestinian state in the middle of the war, and that was celebrated by Hamas. His actions have only fueled the continuation of the war and the suffering in the Gaza Strip until Donald Trump put an end to it and put all the pressure back on Hamas. But we were in a situation where French actions and other European nations, their irresponsible actions and appeasement to radical Islamic terror were in fact continuing the war, because Israel was suffering only for defending themselves, and Hamas was being rewarded, and Hamas knew that if the war were to continue, they would have continued to receive compensation from the French and from the Europeans. But Trump put an end to it. And when we look at Abbas as well, I mean, he's been making promises to the West for decades. He's been making the same promises of reform, but he's continued to pay his pay-for-slay policy, which has been paying terrorists to kill Jews. The more Jews you kill, the more money you make. So Abbas is not really a partner in peace. He's an over 80-year-old man who has been the leader of a corrupt Palestinian Authority who doesn't have respect by his people. And the situation's much more complicated than Abbas and Macron just getting together and deciding to draft a constitution. We see the leading Palestinian polls that came out this month show that the most popular party among Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza continues to be Hamas. If there were to be elections held today, Hamas would become the democratically elected party in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And over half of Palestinians polled in this leading Palestinian survey continue to support the October 7th massacre and continue to believe that it was justified. So if we're talking about a peace process and the prospect of two states, it's premature to discuss this without discussing a full de-radicalization process and having the Palestinians realize that their future lies solely on their own decision to recognize Israel as a Jewish state living side by side with them instead of looking to destroy them. And French and European funds and aid have continuously played into these organizations like Hamas, who have taken millions, billions of aid money and turned Gaza into a terror city. And we don't want to see that anymore. We want to see Gaza thrive. We want to see the Palestinian people prosper. But that depends on getting rid of this ideology that doesn't see Israel as a partner.
Sasha, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, staying on this topic, French President Emmanuel Macron has issued a sharp warning to Israel, saying that any move to annex territory in the West Bank would cross a red line. Speaking in Paris after talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Macron has stated that any such actions would draw a strong European response. He condemned what he called the escalation of settler violence and the rapid expansion of settlements, saying both threaten the region's instability and violate international law. The French leader has urged restraint and renewed dialogue, warning that further annexation could destabilize the entire Middle East. Let's listen into what the French president has said.
Nous sommes enfin revenus sur la situation alarmante en Cisjordanie. La violence des colons et l'accélération des projets de colonisation atteignent de nouveaux records qui menacent la stabilité de la Cisjordanie et constituent des violations du droit international. Comme je l'ai dit précédemment, les projets d'annexion partielle ou totale, légale ou de facto, constituent une ligne rouge à laquelle nous réagirons fortement avec nos partenaires européens s'ils étaient mis en œuvre.
Now we welcome back Sasha Machta. He's a political commentator, joins us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sasha, for staying with us. What could be the potential consequence of West Bank annexations? And if it does happen, do you think that Israelis and Palestinians would be living peacefully side by side under one umbrella?
So first of all, I'd like to say that I don't think that annexation is on the table right now, despite what we may hear in the media and despite the pressure that Netanyahu is facing from the more far-right elements of his coalition with Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and even members of his own party. We have to remember that Benjamin Netanyahu is the prime minister, and at the end of the day, he is the one that's taking the large decisions for better or for worse. And I think that there's an understanding that at the moment an annexation would not be a positive move for Israel. There's still a lot of questions to be answered. What would happen to the 2 million Palestinians? What would happen to a radicalized Palestinian society that were to be absorbed to Israel? It would be a security threat as well. And it's also a move that would have to only come through wide consensus among Israeli society, and that's not on the table. As I mentioned previously, there is consensus that a Palestinian state won't be established in the near future, but when it comes to annexation, there's not that same consensus. But I think that now is time for looking for more creative solutions, how we can separate from and not need to reach a situation where Israel is controlling the lives of Palestinians while not renouncing an inch of our security. So I think that now with the Trump administration, there's an opportunity to reach a solution that's not necessarily two states, and to reach a de-radicalization process which will be necessary for any future arrangement. But the consequences would be pretty severe right now for an annexation, both domestically and internationally. So I think that Netanyahu understands this and that this is premature, and he won't cave into the pressure from some of the more radical elements of his coalition.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Sasha Machta for joining us as a political commentator from Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Now moving on, Hezbollah's leader Naim Qassem has accused the United States of pressuring Lebanon to make one-sided concessions to Israel. without any guarantees in return. Speaking with local media, Qassem has said that Washington is pushing Beirut to disarm Hezbollah while simultaneously cutting off its funding sources. Meanwhile, a U.S. Treasury delegation is set to visit Lebanon this week and has urged officials to halt Iranian funding to the group, which, according to Washington, has exceeded $1 billion since January this year. Hezbollah still reeling from heavy losses in its 2024 war with Israel and the assassination of former leader Hassan Nasrallah has seen its political influence wane, but Qassem insists the group will not give up its weapons. Now for this discussion, we welcome Spencer Critchley. He's a communication strategist, joins us live from California. Thank you very much, Spencer, for joining us again. Good to see you. Spencer, now looking at this, what policy options does Lebanon realistically have to balance U.S. demands with domestic political realities regarding Hezbollah? And what long-term policy approaches could the U.S. adopt to address Hezbollah's presence?
Well, I think that unfortunately the government of Lebanon is weak and has been for some time, and this is one reason why Hezbollah has been able to claim such outsized power. And I also think that this would be why the government of Lebanon is welcoming the role of the United States, and I think is at least open to the role of Israel, because it is the government of Lebanon that originated this idea of disarming Hezbollah. Naim Qassem speaks as if he speaks for the country of Lebanon, but Hezbollah is a predatory presence in Lebanon, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a great many international observers. They claim to represent the Shia component of Lebanon, but they are an armed terrorist group. They don't function democratically, and they disserve the country of Lebanon and are responsible for a great deal of the chaos and violence there. So while in general I'm deeply skeptical of the Trump administration, I think in this case it makes a great deal of sense for the United States to help the legitimate government of Lebanon try to free itself from Hezbollah. And no doubt the Lebanese government, the Americans and the Israelis all see this as an opportune moment, given how gravely weakened militarily Hezbollah is at this moment.
And how might U.S. pressure on Lebanon to curb Hezbollah influence regional stability and Lebanon's internal politics without, or could this risk destabilizing Lebanon further?
I think there's always a risk of that, because Lebanon is not really a functioning nation. It's a collection of ethnic factions and a fragmented nation that has been split into pieces. This, of course, is one of the great tragedies of the Middle East. It's a beautiful country that at one point was considered a global center of culture and civilization, and could be again. I'm not an expert on the internal politics of Lebanon, but I would say that the only hope for any country in that state, I think, is to have a central government which, in the famous formulation, has a monopoly on the use of force. You can't have multiple forces within the same country as you do now, where Hezbollah outguns, or until recently outgunned, the legitimate government of Lebanon. I think to answer the question about hope for the way forward, I think that trade is proving to be a powerful influence, potentially for good, in the region. Now, all too often that has come accompanied with corruption, and that still is a problem, including, unfortunately, here in the United States under our current administration. But as the Arab countries in the region have rethought their strategic objectives, especially vis-a-vis Israel, and have backed away from their traditional commitment to trying to destroy Israel, and realized that they have far more to gain by trading with Israel and living in peace with Israel, I suspect that trade will drive a movement towards peace, or might drive a movement towards peace, if the threat of terrorism can be reduced to a level that it does not disrupt trade. That's very much an open question, of course, because even though the situation, as I just said, seems opportune because Hezbollah has been weakened, so has its sponsor Iran, and so of course of Hamas. The problem is that following the terrible conflict in Gaza over the past couple of years, and following the awful attack on Israel by Hamas, I think we can expect to see a new generation of violent radicals emerging from the scene, and that's really something that's going to be very hard for anybody to try to contain.
Yes, indeed. That's a very good point. Thank you very much, Spencer, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, Saudi Arabia plans to host a U.S.-Saudi investment summit in Washington on November 19th. It is set to take place during Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to the United States. The summit will be co-hosted by Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Investment and the U.S.-Saudi Business Council and is scheduled to take place at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. The Saudi Crown Prince will meet U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on November 18th, though their participation in the summit itself is not confirmed. The event comes as Trump encourages Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords, normalizing relations between Israel and Muslim-majority nations. Saudi Arabia, one of the largest buyers of U.S. arms, may also discuss a new defense agreement with the United States during the visit. Now, going back, we welcome back Spencer Kirtley. He's a communication strategist, joins us live from California. Thank you very much, Spencer, for staying with us. Perfect timing, as you were just mentioning about how trade seemed to be driving towards peace in this region, particularly with Muslim countries in Middle East. How is shifting, or how could this shifting U.S.-Saudi priorities under current administration, Trump and Mohammed bin Salman, how is it impacting broader Middle East diplomacy and security dynamics, especially between Saudi Arabia and U.S.?
You're right, I agree with you. I think this is an excellent example of what we were just talking about, including the complex histories involved here. Saudi Arabia, until quite recently, was a major sponsor and fomenter of terrorist activity going back decades. As a primary sponsor and funder of Wahhabi Islam and madrasas all over the Muslim world that taught this extremely radical version of Islamic fundamentalism, and direct financial support for terrorists, and of course Saudi's implication in the attacks on the United States of September 11th, 2001. The transformation in recent years has been remarkable. Even under the de facto leadership of Mohammed bin Salman, we see a transformation during his short career in power. Not too long ago, he, by all indications, ordered the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi, an Arab-American journalist, and was a principal actor in the terrible war that Saudi Arabia launched against Yemen. And yet, under this same person, we see dramatic social progress and economic transformation in Saudi Arabia. Really hard to find precedents for it, with the remarkable progress on the rights of women, for example, attempts to modernize the economy and move away from dependence on oil. And if it succeeds, that would move Saudi Arabia from being a classic resource-based economy under authoritarian leadership that's ultimately doomed to fail, somewhat similar to Russia as a sort of slow-motion disaster, where you have authoritarian leadership based on extraction of resources and no essential economic innovation and no freedom to innovate. So, as I say, very complicated situation, and you have MBS meeting in Washington with the Trump administration, and as I was just noting, unfortunately, the Trump administration is corrupt from top to bottom under the leadership of Trump, who is corrupt from his head to his toes. And yet, by building on trade relationships, both between the United States and Saudi Arabia and across the Middle East, and including the United States in those relationships, as well as other developed countries, There is great potential to build peace and build prosperity in ways that, the Middle East has been starved of for far too long.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Spencer Critchley for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, Iraq's Electoral Commission has reported turnout of more than 55% in the country's general elections. This is an unexpectedly high figure as compared to elections in the previous years. The Commission has said that the turnout figure is based on results from most polling stations across the country. According to official data, over 12 million Iraqis have voted out of more than 21 million eligible voters. This strong voter participation marks a significant increase from the record low turnout of 41% in the 2021 elections. This turnout came despite a boycott by supporters of influential Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, who had urged his followers to stay away from the polls. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.